We think we know the Western Front. We see the photos in black and white, the mud, the wire, the haunted eyes of young men. We hear the stories of heroic charges and unimaginable suffering. But those images, those tales, they miss one crucial, strange detail. They miss the punchline. Because in the trenches of the Great War, something profoundly human and deeply bizarre happened. The men learned to laugh at their own impending doom. The soldiers of World War I didn't just survive the war, they joked their way through it. Our story begins in a place where mud wasn't just dirt, it was a hungry, clinging beast. The year is 1916. The place, a trench somewhere near the Somme. The air is thick with the metallic tang of blood and the sickly sweet smell of chlorine gas. It's a place where a man can find himself knee-deep in water and body parts, and yet the most common complaint you'd hear wasn't about the enemy or the artillery. It was about the lice. They were everywhere. They lived in the seams of the uniforms, in the hair, in the cracks of their skin. They were a constant, itching torment, and like all constant torments, they became a joke. A man might turn to his comrade and say, "I've been in a relationship for 2 years now, me and my lice. We're very close." The other would reply, "Well, if you're ever lonely, just put your hand down your shirt, you'll find a party." This wasn't a flippant disregard for their reality. It was a way of seizing back control. The lice weren't just pests. They were characters in a surreal, shared nightmare. You couldn't defeat them, so you might as well give them names. You couldn't escape them, so you might as well make up stories about their social lives. This macabre humor was a coping mechanism. It was the mind's last line of defense against a reality that was designed to break it. When the war started, many men joined up with a sense of patriotic duty. They imagined a clean, swift war of glory, but the reality was a muddy, soul-crushing crawl. The poetry of the early war, full of words like honor and sacrifice, was quickly replaced by a new kind of verse. The men in the trenches began to write their own poems, their own songs, and tell their own jokes, and the punchlines were almost always about death. Imagine a group of soldiers huddled together during a lull in the fighting. A new recruit, still wide-eyed and terrified, asks an old-timer, "What's the difference between a sniper and a politician?" The old soldier, who has seen too much to be surprised by anything, takes a long drag from his cigarette and says, "A sniper only kills one person at a time." It wasn't a joke that would get you a laugh in a pub back home, but in the trenches where men were dying a dozen at a time for a few yards of mud, it was a joke that made sense. It was a way of lashing out at the men who had put them there, the men who talked about the war from comfortable desks 100 miles away, the politicians, the generals, the men who couldn't even tell the difference between a trench and a foxhole. This gallows humor, this grim comedy, was a way of creating a shared identity. It was a private language spoken by the initiated. If you were laughing at a joke about a man losing his legs to a shell, it meant you understood. It meant you had been there, or you were brave enough to face the fact that you might be there tomorrow. The joke wasn't a way of dismissing the horror. It was a way of acknowledging it, of looking it straight in the face and saying, "You won't break me." World War I, often called the Great War, raged from 1914 to 1918, drawing millions into a conflict that redefined warfare. It was a war of attrition, fought in trenches, narrow, muddy ditches stretching across Europe. Soldiers faced relentless dangers, artillery barrages, machine gun fire, poison gas, and the ever-present threat of a sniper's bullet. The psychological toll was immense, with shell shock leaving men trembling and broken. Yet in this bleak landscape, humor became a lifeline. Gallows humor, as it's known, is the kind that stares death in the face and laughs. It's not about joy, it's about survival. One of the most remarkable examples of this humor was the Wipers Times, a satirical newspaper produced by British soldiers in the ruins of Ypres, Belgium, pronounced Wipers by the troops. Ypres was a focal point of some of the war's bloodiest battles. In 1916, Captain Fred Roberts and Lieutenant Jack Pearson of the 12th Battalion, Sherwood Foresters, stumbled upon a damaged printing press in the bombed-out city. With the help of a sergeant who knew his way around a press, they decided to create a newspaper, not a somber record of events, but a defiant, humorous rag filled with jokes, poems, and cartoons that mocked the absurdity of their situation. The paper's motto, "Are we as offensive as we might be?" was a clever double entendre. In military terms, an offensive meant an attack, but the phrase also hinted at being cheeky or rude. It was a jab at the military's obsession with grand assaults while poking fun at their own irreverence. The Wipers Times didn't shy away from subversive humor. One issue featured a letter from a soldier asking, "Is it permissible to shoot a superior officer?" The reply, printed with a straight face, was, "Yes, given extenuating circumstances." This quip captured the frustration many felt toward officers who seemed detached from the realities of trench life. The paper also published grimly humorous poems, like this one. There was a young man of Avernus who took a stroll down a long shady lane. He trod on a dud, half hidden in mud. He never will do it again. The poem's dark humor lay in its casual reference to an unexploded shell, a dud that could end a life in an instant. Yet, by framing it as a cautionary tale, the soldiers turned fear into something they could laugh at, if only for a moment. Slang was another outlet for humor. The term blighty, derived from the Hindi word for foreign land, referred to Britain, a place of safety and longing. A blighty wound was a soldier's dark dream, an injury serious enough to send them home but not life-threatening. The term was both hopeful and grim, reflecting the desperate desire to escape the front. Other slang terms like funky villas for the French village Fonquevillers or rob all my comrades for the Royal Army Medical Corps showed how soldiers used wordplay to mock their circumstances. As the war ground on, the humor grew darker. By 1917, with battles like Passchendaele claiming countless lives, jokes about death became more common. A soldier hit by shrapnel might mutter, "Well, at least I won't have to dig any more latrines." Such humor was a grim acknowledgement that death could be a release from the relentless misery of trench life. Yet even these dark jests were a form of defiance, a refusal to let despair win. The Wipers Times and other trench journals, like the Australian Aussie magazine, were more than just outlets for humor. They were acts of rebellion. Produced under enemy fire, often on captured printing presses, these papers gave soldiers a voice. They mocked the enemy, calling Germans Bocker, or depicting Kaiser Wilhelm II as a bumbling fool, and satirized the military hierarchy. One cartoon in Aussie showed a soldier getting a haircut while a shell flew overhead, with the barber saying, "Keep your head still, or I'll cut your ear off." The absurdity of worrying about a haircut in a war zone was the point. When the war ended in November 1918, the soldiers returned home, carrying scars both physical and mental, but they also carried the humor that had sustained them. The Wipers Times published its final issue as The Better Times, a hopeful nod to the future. Its legacy endured, influencing post-war literature and culture. Books like Eric Maria Remarque's All Quiet on the Western Front captured the dark humor of the trenches, while plays and films like Oh, What a Lovely War used satire to critique the war's futility. These works remind us that humor was not just a coping mechanism, but a form of resistance, a way to assert humanity in the face of dehumanizing conflict. Thank you for watching. If you liked it, please like and subscribe to the channel.